How do everybody? This is Mark from Morrigan's Creations and welcome to the Christmas video. This is something that me and Terrain by Iron have been planning for a couple months now, and I'm really excited to show you what I made. Originally, the concept was that we're going to have a set list of materials that we were going to build using, and to be honest, I think I only used a couple things off that list. And I'm pretty sure Iron hasn't stuck to it either, so we'll just say that we were doing a challenge to build something Christmassy. So my idea was that I was going to build a sleigh, and I was going to have that piloted by an orc, Father Christmas. So when I was starting my build, I was rummaging through all my bits boxes looking for something that I could use. And as you saw from the very start of this video, I used I think it's like a cheap Nerf gun, called like an X-Shot. It's only like £1 or something like that, and I cut that in half and I attached that on either side of an old train. So right now you're going to be seeing me using a technique that I like to call spot welding, using glue. It's where I use the bare minimum amount of glue on any contact points that I can find, fill it with glue and put a absolute crap ton of baking powder in there, just so that something is going to be holding this thing together. I do actually reinforce that with something that was actually on the list. EVA foam, as you can see here, and some also a bit of corrugated card that I found in the works. I'm going to be cutting this up into haphazard shapes, anything remotely square, and I'm going to be putting that all over the build. These are going to be where the orcs have literally hodgepodge this thing together. This is the only thing holding it together. This is where damage has happened. Anything that they can find, they have attached to this thing. And if you know anything about orcs, if enough of them believe that it works, it works. That's the only reason that these reindeer can fly, is because they think that they can. Perhaps in the wreckage of some kind of library, they must have seen some children's books that had flying reindeer on the front, being pulled by some master controlling them, handing out goodies. The only goodies these are going to be handing out is either coal or shooters. Right now, as you can see, I'm just putting in a little bit of that corrugated card. Looks like standard corrugated sheet metal when it's painted up in silver. I'm sure a lot of you are looking at this now and cringing, seeing that massive line going down the middle of the build. That's where the two halves of the bubble blaster meet. And I hate to tell you, but it's still there in the end. I didn't actually address it. I covered a fair bit up with these bits of EVA foam, but it's still there, and you're going to be looking at it for a while. Now I'm just adding this piece of an old Airfix tank kit, and that's just going to show that the orcs have salvaged anything that they can find. Now it's actually time for the man himself. This is going to be our Father SQUIGMAS, is what I'm going to be calling him now. And to have our fella holding the reins, we're going to have to modify his arms a little bit. To do this, I'm using part of the Orc Boys kit, and I'm snipping the gun from his hand, shaving it down until it's literally a fist. Once it's been shaved down, I then cut it at the wrist, and I reattach it with a bit of super glue. So I didn't actually want just some random orc piloting this thing. So I decided to do a bit of green stuff sculpting, and I added a little beard to him, which I'm quite happy with. I'm using a toothpick for this, and I'm just engraving some little lines in there, here and there. And what you have to bear in mind is at this scale you're not going to be seeing every individual hair. So when I'm sculpting this beard, I'm trying to sculpt more clumps more than anything. This just helps it look more uniform, and also as if it's part of the actual Games Workshop sculpt itself. And once again, we're going to do this with the mustache as well. It's going to be more suggesting the shape of a mustache instead of sculpting every individual hair. But I think it actually turned out really well. I'm quite happy with this. It doesn't stand out very well at the moment, and that's because this model is actually one that I started a while ago, and I had already painted the head. But luckily the paint layer was thin enough that I could just prime over the top. Didn't have to strip it or anything like that. So being Santa Claus, I didn't want him being really cold. I know orcs are made of some hard stuff, but even they need a little bit of warmth, not just that tank top. So I'm just adding a little bit of fur coming out from underneath. Now that everything has been built and converted, it's time for everybody's favourite bit, the painting part of the video. I know there are some of you that actually don't like the painting part, so I have actually cut a fair bit of it out of this video. For those of you that do, there is a little special announcement towards the end, so stick around for that. So like last video, I'm going to be sticking with the layering technique. If you haven't watched the last video, I'm going to put a card in the top right hand corner. And to paint the skin, I'm using 3 main colours. I'm going to be using Castellan Green, Auric Flesh and Moot Green. For the leather parts, I'm going to be using Gorthor Brown and mixing in a bit of Thondia Brown. I'm going to do the same for all the fur and his beard, but I'm slowly going to build up layers and adding in a bit of that Pallid Witch flesh towards the highlights. To keep in with the Christmas theme, I'm going to be painting his little vest with a base of Mephiston Red. We're slowly going to be highlighting up to an Evil Sun Scarlet. And it's always important to remember that I am thinning these paints, building these up very gradually. For all of the gold parts of the sleigh, we are going to be using Gehenna's Gold from Citadel before absolutely soaking the entire model in Agrac's Earthshade. Before I actually forget to mention, I did actually prime this in red just to save on a bit of the painting. So to bring back a bit of the colour, after that wash, we are going to be using a bit of that Mephiston Red and Evil Sun Scarlet, and we're just going to dry brush that over the entire model just to bring up the high points again. And to help with that a little bit more, we're also going to be using the same colours and doing a bit of edge highlighting. The only difference here is that I started to add a bit of Flash Gets Yellow just to the highest points, just to highlight it a little bit further. In order to paint the copious amounts of coal, we're going to be using the contrast paint Black Legion. We're also going to add little points of this over the model, just to break up the colour a little bit, keeping it from being completely red. Next, I'm adding a bit of that Gehenna's Gold back to the cogs, just to bring them up a little bit after that wash. Once again, we're going to add this to other parts of the model just to break up the monotony of the red. For the silver parts of the model, I went with a base of Lead Belcher. I really like this paint as it's quite a dark silver, closer towards a steel, and I also add this to a bit of packing sponge and stipple that over the rest of the model just to make it look like the paint's chipped. Next, I'm going to be adding yet another layer of Agrac's Earthshade just over all the steel bits. This is just going to make that metal look a little bit older and less new. So for those of you that really enjoy the painting parts, I'm happy to announce that there's going to be an exclusive video on my Patreon where I'm going to be painting all of these reindeer. I'm not going to show the full thing in this video. It's going to be on there, you can judge from as little as £1.